I don't
Jaina
know.
refuses
I hope
it.
Arthas plays a part. I scrap the Sylvanas redemption, kill her, Arthas redemption, and then I'm
Never
on board.
happening.
Yikes.
In all of World of Warcraft, I don't think there's ever been a character as pivotal and important as Arthas. Arthas influenced most of World of Warcraft's story, and almost everything that happens in WoW can be traced back to Arthas in some way. Sometimes it's a significant way, like being the main antagonist of an expansion. Sometimes it's in smaller ways, such as being the first of many abusers for another. Most of the most popular characters in WoW have some ties to Arthas in some way, and he's the one character that most people are familiar with. Which is why it frustrates me that in recent years there's been this push from the seedier and disgusting sides of the community to demand that Arthas get a redemption and insist that Arthas did nothing wrong, which they also did with Garrosh at the same time, demonstrating first and foremost that men really should just not be allowed to have opinions ever. So let's talk about Arthas. Now, normally when I talk about villains that people want redemption arcs for, I'm usually extremely negative because the prospect of those characters getting one is actually, really high, and they weren't all that great to begin with. But when it comes to Arthas, my objections come from a different place. I'm of the opinion that Arthas' story is one of the best character stories Blizzard ever made, in that you see a man doom himself through his own decisions and his refusal to listen to the people around him, allow his ego to completely consume him and spitefully drag him to his own death and subsequent earned torment at the hands of all of the people he wronged, and also Tyrion is there. But despite Arthas' popularity as a character, his story isn't really appreciated all that much. Recent years, and especially with the release of Shadowlands, have shown people wanting Arthas to receive some sort of redemption in the form of being absolved of all of his crimes. There's an assumption that he became a victim once he took up Frostmourne, or put on the Lich King's crown, to insist he was being controlled by Ner'zhul or the Jailer. It's not only a denial of the actual story, but it's also an incessant demand for the story to be worse. Arthas' story isn't one of being duped, it's one of arrogance, bloodlust, and entitlement. As a paladin, Arthas was hot-headed and arrogant, and it often didn't take much for him to rush to eradication as a solution for his problems.
These orcs will never surrender.
Then let's get in there and destroy the beasts.
Remember, Arthas, we are paladins. Vengeance cannot be a part of what we must do. If we allow our passions to turn to bloodlust, we will become as vile as the orcs.
Throughout the entire campaign, Arthas is so quick to rush to extermination as a solution that it starts to alarm people around him. As the investigation into the plague goes on, he eventually devolves to the point of advocating genocide.
These people have all been infected. They may look fine now, but it's just a matter of time before they turn into the undead. This entire city must be purged.
What? How can you even consider that? There's got to be some other way.
Damn it, Uther. As your future king, I order you to purge this city.
You are not my king yet, boy. Nor would I obey that command even if you were.
In the face of a potential calamity, Arthas' first suggestion is mass slaughter. Sounds rather familiar, doesn't it?
And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution.
Genocide.
But random, dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman.
Stratholme is given a lot of narrative weight by the community, but it's interesting just how quickly the game brushes it off. We rush off to Northrend almost immediately with only a single cutscene from Jaina in the aftermath. And of course we don't hang around for very long. Stratholme is the first city Arthas destroys, but throughout the next two campaigns, he sows destruction all over the Eastern Kingdoms. Stratholme isn't even his worst crime. Arthas' decision to chase Mal'Ganis to Northrend is seen by everyone as a terminally bad move, but Arthas simply cannot stop lunging into bad decisions and think for a few moments. His desire to defend his people has always been, in reality, a thirst for blood. Throughout the human campaign, Medivh appears before Terenas and Arthas to tell them to take their people to Kalimdor, where they can fight the Burning Legion who is behind all of this. And both of them refuse out of pride. It's only Jaina who actually listens and takes the survivors of Lordaeron to Kalimdor. While Arthas is dooming himself, Jaina is actually saving the people of Lordaeron. Arthas continues to use defending his homeland as an excuse for what is, in actuality, a lust for power, even to the point of taking up Frostmourne and losing the last vestiges of his sanity. There's this perception that Arthas became a different person after taking up Frostmourne, but as we've seen, Arthas has always been power hungry. all that really happened throughout the human campaign is that the people who were reining him in steadily fell away to be replaced only by the Lich King, who goaded and enabled him further. Arthas never truly cared about Lordaeron's people. He never really wanted to defend the kingdom. He only wanted to protect what he believed rightfully belonged to him. And after killing his father, he burned Lordaeron to the ground to raise it into undeath, because it's now his kingdom, and he will do whatever he pleases with it. Arthas tears across Lordaeron, remorselessly undoing everything he tried to do in the previous campaign, slays his mentor, and then traps his soul into Frostmourne.
I dearly hope that there's a special place in hell waiting for you, Arthas.
We may never know, Uther. I intend to live forever.
In the book, he even dumps his father's ashes onto the ground after only thinking it over for a moment just to keep Kel'Thuzad's remains safe to make the journey to Quel'Thalas. And you all know what happens in Quel'Thalas. I think out of all of Arthas' crimes, this is perhaps the most well-known. Sylvanas holds off Arthas so effectively that he becomes enraged and turns her into a banshee out of spite. And I need to give special mention to this one line of dialogue.
After all you've put me through, woman, the last thing I'll give you is the peace of death.
This one line where Arthas is practically whispering into the player's ear is creepy, it's disturbing, and for me, it's actually extremely triggering, and it's probably one of the most excellently delivered lines in the game. It's the Undead campaign where Justin Gross really shows off his talent as a voice actor in how he portrays Arthas' almost sneering sadism at times.
I didn't know what it held. Nor does it matter. I'll take what I came for one way or another.
And we all know the story from there. Arthas rips Sylvanas' soul apart and turns her into a banshee. He lets Sylvanas keep her self-awareness, which was unusual for undead at the time, just to make her watch as he destroyed her homeland, unable to stop and unable to even exert her own will. Then he continues to torture her for the better part of a year afterward, while insisting that it was her fault that she was even in this position in the first place. He even keeps her body in an iron coffin to find ways to use it to further torment her, and spends the next year taking out all of his anger and sadism on this one woman. Arthas' torment of Sylvanas is read by many as abuse and by many more as rape. It simply hits too close to home for a lot of people to be read as anything else. This is why Sylvanas is often called an abuse or rape survivor, and it's one of the main reasons why calls for Arthas' redemption are so ghoulish, because Arthas' actions here are simply too personal and too sadistic to be the work of the Lich King controlling him. What Arthas does to Sylvanas is personal, and the sheer unbridled sadism with which he does it is nothing short of disturbing. It's too disturbing. Ner'zhul has no reason to endlessly torture someone like this. He doesn't care about roadblocks as long as his long-term goals are fulfilled. The Lich King's slaughter is dispassionate. It's a means to an end to raise more undead. It's never this personal for him. This is all Arthas. If there is ever one thing to take away from Arthas' story, it's that this is the ultimate turning point of him from just another fallen hero archetype into something truly disgusting and monstrous. And so Arthas defiles the Sunwell and continues to murder and pillage his way across the world until he eventually becomes one with the Lich King, and this is where things get interesting. In the book, there's a scene towards the end while Arthas is in hibernation, where he's arguing with Ner'zhul and his own conscience. Both are trying to pull him on different paths. Ner'zhul wants Arthas to merge with him so he can have complete control, and his conscience wants him to repent. Arthas' response is to destroy his conscience, and then destroy Ner'zhul and take control of the Scourge for himself. There was a lot of debate about Ner'zhul being destroyed after Sylvanas broke the helm, but in truth he was destroyed long before then. Arthas was always fully in control of his own actions during his time as a Death Knight and the Lich King, and so far Blizzard has yet to actually retcon that. In fact, Steve Danusa reinforced in an interview with Bellular Gaming saying that Arthas wasn't mind-controlled, and this follows through with the entire book. People like to imagine Arthas as being this noble hero tainted by Frostmourne, but he was slipping long before then. Arthas was arrogant, quick to anger, and quick to violence well before the plague even became an issue in Lordaeron. Uther chides him for his bloodlust on the second mission of the human campaign. Even the dungeon they made out of Stratholme in Wrath of the Lich King shows Arthas never once showing even the slightest bit of remorse or even sadness over the destruction and slaughter. There's all this art of Arthas weeping over Stratholme and staring at the blood on his hands in guilt, but in reality he's assured and confident in his decision, and then chases after Mal'Ganis to seek revenge. The reality of Arthas' story is that Ner'zhul acted like he was pulling the strings, but he was just another casualty to Arthas' lust for power, and he has never once not been in control of his own actions. Arthas as a character has always been driven to rage when people get in his way, and his story both in the book and in game reinforce that. In the Halls of Reflection, when an Alliance party speaks to Uther, Uther makes reference to the idea that the piece of Arthas that still lingers inside the Lich King may be all that's keeping the Scourge from eradicating Azeroth. This is one of the many arguments used to support a redemption for Arthas, in that he's no longer in control and he's subjected to the whims of the Lich King. But when you finally get to the final boss fight, you learn that the real reason he hasn't unleashed the Scourge like Locust is because he was waiting for the champion to come and fight him so that he could kill her and raise her into a harbinger of death and destruction and make the Scourge completely unstoppable. People suspect he's still a good person deep down, and he openly says no. But this moment stands out for me for different reasons. It's not a revelation about Arthas, but about Uther. It's evocative of a scene in Return of the Jedi when Obi-Wan tells Luke that Anakin Skywalker ceased to exist and became Darth Vader, that Anakin Skywalker is dead. But the main point of Anakin's story is that Obi-Wan is wrong. Anakin never died or became a separate personality. He's sunk so far into grief and regret that he's tried so hard to forget everything about his old life because it only causes him pain. And he becomes angry when someone reminds him of it. It's an extremely unhealthy coping mechanism to try and put the past behind you in every possible way. And ultimately, Anakin proves both Obi-Wan's assertion and his own to be false. The assertion that Anakin Skywalker died and was replaced with Darth Vader is something that Obi-Wan tells himself because he just can't accept the reality that his friend and student would willingly turn to evil. Uther is Obi-Wan in this scenario, unable to accept what became of his pupil and inventing a reassuring fantasy to avoid accepting it, even as he suffers the torment of Frostmourne. It's a sobering moment, and you really feel sorry for Uther being unable to accept the truth, and he probably never will. Because when you find the silver hand badge on Arthas' corpse, he flat out says that the memories of Arthas before killing him are the memories that he chooses to keep. Uther willfully admits that he's going to continue lying to himself. And that's actually really heartbreaking. The entire attitude around the chest is sad, really. When you kill Arthas as part of the Shadowmourne quest, he drops an item called the Sealed Chest. When you take it to Darien to open it, you discover that Arthas kept several sentimental trinkets from his days before the Scourge. A locket from Jaina, a badge from the Silver Hand that Uther bestowed on him, and a training sword from his days training with Muradin. They're all rather bittersweet trinkets that a lot of people use as proof that Arthas still had his humanity. But what stands out to me is that all of these trinkets represent people he failed or betrayed. These people were Arthas' friends in life, and all of them were gravely hurt by him. And when you turn them into their owners, they all have rather depressing reactions. Jaina believes Arthas will be free from the grip of Frostmourne, and Muradin blames himself for what Arthas has become for finding Frostmourne in the first place. What truly hammers in just how heartbreakingly in denial all of them are, is that among this chest of sentimental and nostalgic trinkets, there's also a vial of blood that he took from Sylvanas. Lying right there among his silver hand badge and Jaina's locket is a souvenir he took from a woman he killed, raised, and kept self-aware so that he could continue to torture her. Had the chest only contained the 3 bittersweet trinkets, people could have made a case for Arthas being truly good in his heart. A reductive and poorly thought out case, but a case nonetheless. But this being among them paints a much darker picture of Arthas' psyche. This stops resembling a heartbreaking memento of better days, and starts to more resemble the mementos of a serial killer and possible rapist. It reminds me of how Ted Bundy used to keep the severed heads of his victims as mementos. The items in this chest prove that yes, Arthas still had his humanity. He was still himself deep down, and I can think of nothing to say about Arthas that would be more damning than that.
The dirty bum, 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 the dirty bum, bum, bum. They had it coming.
I dearly hope that there's a special place in hell waiting for you, Arthas.